Resident Evil 6.
Devil May Cry.
You might be asking yourself, what similarities does Resident Evil 6 and Devil May Cry 5 have in common? It's quite the oddball scenario pairing up a theory chat about two games that clearly have distinctive genres. However, you might be a little bit impressed about some of the things conjured up that ranges from sheer coincidence to, okay, these games certainly have something in common more often than not. As a short disclaimer, keep in mind this is a theory video and most of the things that I'll be saying will stem from pure speculation. Whether you choose to believe or disagree is all a matter of opinion and perspective. Let's start off with one of the biggest features reeled out of the ocean. The crossover system, in layman's terms, was Capcom's means of introducing co-op within a specific chapter. The way it worked in Resident Evil 6 is no different from how it worked in DMC5. You might be on a specific part of the game that has multiple characters present, forcing them to work together to clear out enemies, advance the story, solve puzzles, or participate in boss battles. There's a slight difference with the ghost battle concept in DMC that allows player performance to be recorded as opposed to RE6 leaving everything up to the brain of the AI. As usual, if you don't care about crossing paths with your buddy in Timbuktu, then this option can be cut off to enjoy offline play. Next up, we have the introduction of days and months being added to Devil May Cry 5. This helps shed some light on exact character placement that correlates to the story of having 3 playable characters. We've only seen a vague idea of how Devil May Cry was coordinated with the timeline originally. While mostly being set in a contemporary time, it was obvious there were no dates or years being documented within the in-game lore outside of DMC1 explaining that Sparta rebelled against his own demon kind 2 millenniums ago. It's approximately 2,000 years later as we venture on with Dante that either pushed the timeline forward or regulated things to a prequel status when we got to Devil May Cry 3. The official timeline is still confusing as fuck, so I tried to use the official words of the producer to shed some light on the order utilized. Each relative Devil May Cry entry goes like this as followed: DMC 3, DMC 1, DMC the anime, DMC 2, DMC 4, and finally ending with Devil May Cry 5 going beyond 2 for once, thank God. I bet you're wondering, how does this draw a parallel to Resident Evil 6? Simple, Resident Evil 6 used a similar date placement system that told the story of the characters before and after they intersected. It's a nifty little feature with the cutscene viewer in Resident Evil 6 that helps timeline consistency if the viewers were invested between each campaign from a story perspective. While galleries aren't new to both franchises, I think you could find a small similarity with Nico's jukebox in DMC5. It's just one of those passing mentions in Resident Evil 6 with the collections jukebox where you can find all sorts of figurines and files. Not sure what this version will be like in DMC5, but I assume it will be some sort of gallery with music and figurines. There's really a similar plot correlation to the whole apocalyptic feel of the story scenarios between DMC5 and Resident Evil 6. Resident Evil 6 really gave off this whole global outbreak feel as if the world was ending before we knew it. A mass scale of jeopardy can also be seen in Devil May Cry 5 with the demon tree pretty much turning half of humanity into black ash. If you want my opinion, I think both games have that whole world in peril situation going on, which means all hands are on deck with the multiple protagonists featured throughout the plot. Speaking of plot threads, I have a theory that Capcom will use the signature trope of using a new character as a sacrificial lamb to prevent main character death. I know you're already asking me, Ren, what does that mean specifically? Well, spoiler alert for Resident Evil 6, it's an old fucking game anyway. Piers Nevins sacrifices himself for the greater good of the BSAA to allow Chris Redfield to live. He was a new character that was fairly liked liked and a pretty bloated experience. Do you see where I'm getting at here with this when we think of V? V being the sacrificial lamb that probably will give Dante a power boost, that probably might give Nero a power boost to defeat Urizen. V's face is pretty much crumbling away in most of the trailers we've seen of him, and the act of demon murder sustains that body of his. So I think the battle with the final boss is going to leave V in a severely weakened state, because hashtag I need demons to sustain myself, hashtag I can't kill this big motherfucker by myself will be so prevalent throughout the entire battle. Also, I guess we can say that Nero really isn't too indistinguishable from Jake Mueller's position. Both of them were set up as new main characters that had bloodlines to important characters in their own respective franchises, effectively meaning that Capcom wanted to pass this torch to the next generation with their very own inclusion. Jake is the son of Wesker, and every star seems to align with the fact that Nero is the son of Dante's brother Virgil. Even the way some of these new heroes were conceived is nearly the same. Two respectable antagonists went to shag some random vagina in the middle of nowhere without any reasoning behind it, despite Wesker and Virgil having more of a lust for power than anything else. It especially doesn't make sense in Wesker's case, since he's narcissistic, always wanting the winnowing of humanity when he finally reached apex godhood with his newfound powers. I guess maybe the idea of getting a thought to pull on your complete global masturbation trigger doesn't need to be explained. I'd even go as far as to say that there could be a potential scene of conflict with the revelation that Nero is indeed Virgil's son, and Dante will probably be hiding the truth from him, or he probably already knew during DMC4. It's also similar to how Chris explains to Jake that he killed Wesker, his own father. Gross overreaction included much. I mean, Jake didn't really care that much for Wesker, but he decided to point a gun at him and pull the trigger anyway, so they have some sort of rivalry going on. I don't know, it's a bit of diverging here. Either way, it's clear that Rocket Boy Drew is likely to remain in Devil May Cry as a playable character for a long time, since his success at appealing to a younger generation worked in Itsuno's eyes. Jake is on the outs after the critical reception of Resident Evil 6 and Capcom deeming that game as a failure. Most Resident Evil fans didn't take too kindly to Jake or Ethan as new heroes of the series, and really, can you blame them? My doormat has more personality than Ethan Winters. I'm also fairly certain that it would be a national crime if they didn't manage to let us play with Virgil in DMC5 to some extent. I'd assume the ultimate treat would be if they did something equivalent to Ada Wong's campaign in Resident Evil 6, where you got to play as her amongst the other heroes. That would mean that Virgil wouldn't be regulated to DMC5 SC status, and he'd have a mini campaign that you wouldn't have to pay for. Capcom is doing this whole kick of free DLC, so here's fingers crossed, here's wishful thinking that we get more characters down the line. I heard a snippet from an article somewhere where Itsuno said that multiple characters were indeed on the table depending on how Devil May Cry 5 sold and depending on the fan support for those multiple characters as DLC. So let your voices be heard on Twitter, let it be heard everywhere. Let people know you want more characters in Devil May Cry 5, and be sure to support the product. I think he would just have a mini campaign that will be done solo, but like I said again, wishful thinking at best. It would be cool if they hid a mini campaign in the game and surprise us again, just like Resident Evil 6 did. I think it's safe to say that the dust is now settled, and I think we should close the video on my thought process as to why I believe these correlations exist between Resident Evil 6 and Devil May Cry 5. I think Itsuno used some cues from RE6 as a basis for making the biggest DMC project he could ever make, taking those unique assets from that game and making them benefit him along the way. I can necessarily say that those philosophies weren't a bad thing. RE6 being touted as big and ambitious can be seen as the right words to use for a proper sequel, making it bigger and better. The difference is that quantity doesn't always equal quality, and the downfall of RE6 began with awful decisions that made certain campaigns less fun than others. I am sure with the recent DMC5 demo, this isn't likely to happen, as the game feels fun throughout, without any questionable gameplay hurdles that felt like a chore to do. It's sad that RE6 remains to be seen as a guilty pleasure for me, but I can cite all the negatives in that game faster than you can say Claire sandwich. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and basically it means maybe, just maybe, Insuno can take Sasaki's vision and shake the industry with his new product. Maybe future Capcom games will apply the bigger and better philosophy properly, and maybe RE6 sparked determination out of Insuno. We may never know, but at least you know exactly what I think about that. This is Renegade Operative signing off, and hopefully you guys really enjoyed this video. Remember to like, share, subscribe, comment in the comment section, dislike. Hey, it's a free country, and just remember, you know, I took a lot of work in making this, so again, these videos don't come out super fast as I would like, but remember, quality is greater than quantity. Resident Evil 6 could have used a lesson about that. But anyway, I'm gonna sign off here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this once again, and I will see you guys next time. Later.